Hello, this is Mark Dunning, President of AWRA. Welcome to this month's posting of Windows on Water Management, short audio interviews with leaders in water resources management that provide a window into their perspectives and practice. Today we're honored to have with us Dr. Denise Reed, Chief Scientist at the Water Institute of the Gulf in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Dr. Reed is a nationally and internationally recognized expert in coastal sustainability issues. Denise's impressive bio can be found in this posting. As many of you listening to today's interview know, AWRA is committed to advancing integrated water resources management, or IWRM, as a basic approach to addressing complex water resources issues. I can think of no more important or complex issue than coastal sustainability. Our coasts are economic magnets accounting for almost half of the nation's GDP. They are equally population magnets, with an estimated 39% of our population living in counties directly on a coast. And of course, our coasts and coastal wetlands are natural resources treasures with enormous biodiversity, providing numerous vital ecosystem services, such as serving as nurseries for fish and wildlife, filtering sediments, and improving water quality, and serving as barriers to ocean storms. The demands made on our coasts do not always exist in harmony, and that seems to me to be a principal challenge confronting IWRM in general. That is, balancing human and environmental needs. So we're very pleased to have Dr. Reed with us today to provide her perspective on this very significant and very tough issue as it applies to our coasts. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Denise.
You're welcome, Mark.
First of all, could you tell us just a little bit about this Water Institute of the Gulf? What is that and what's its mission?
The Water Institute is a new institute in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's a 501c3 independent research institute. It has a board of directors, and our main mission is really doing the work that it takes to link knowledge, the kinds of things that folks in universities come up with and do very well, towards action. Action agencies want to get something done on the ground. So our job is to link those two together. We do research, we do come up with new findings, but really kind of putting the information together in a way that people can really use it. That's what we're about.
Great. That sounds very, very worthwhile, to say the least.
Thank you.
So this issue of sustainable coast, first of all, what do we mean by a sustainable coast? How would we recognize one?
Well, I think it's in the eye of the beholder, really, because it really depends on what you want to get out of the coastal system. As you know, and as you mentioned in your introduction, coastal systems are complex. They're often important ecologically, but they're also important economically. Massive ports, the ends of big river systems like the Mississippi that we have here in Louisiana. Lots of pretty important things go on. There are also some areas of this country where there are huge urban developments right on the coast as well. So what you mean by sustainability is going to vary from one coastal setting to another. But in my mind, it really means that the kinds of things that go on within a coastal system can continue to go on for the foreseeable future. And really, I think it takes a long-term view to think about sustainability. It's not about what we do or how things are different this year versus next year. You really have to look into decades to come. And one of the reasons that makes it difficult in coastal systems is, compared to perhaps, I don't know, mountainous areas or upland river systems or something like that, is that there's a very dynamic change going on already. And so we have two kind of things that really influence this change at the coast, one of which is sea level rise, obviously. Global sea levels are rising. And in some areas, like Louisiana, but also in places like Chesapeake Bay or in other parts of the country, local subsidence actually exacerbates the effects of sea level rise. So if the land is sinking and the water is rising, then obviously you've got some change going on in a coastal system. But the other thing, and of course, that compounds that are these events that come in kind of pulsed events, if you like, and on the Gulf Coast where I work mostly, they can be issues like hurricanes or clearly things like Sandy on the eastern seaboard. But I think also on the West Coast, there might be different kinds of pulsed events, and there might be things like droughts, for instance, that really change the way freshwater supply interacts with coastal ecosystems or actually provides freshwater resources to other things that are important to coastal communities. And so you've got this idea of long-term change, and then you've got these events, either kind of on an annual cycle, something like a drought, or maybe several years in a row, or really kind of everything happens in a week associated with a storm. So you've got this dynamic going on, and we've got all these important things that we do as a society and that we value in coastal systems. And so when you think about sustainability, it's really about what kinds of things can we do that ensure that those critical functions that coasts provide to society can continue to be there into the future. It's very related to another term which has been discussed a lot recently, particularly in the post-Sandy environment, which is resilience. The idea that a coastal system or something that happens in a coastal system can withstand or still be there in some way, or albeit perhaps slightly altered or requiring some kind of intervention to actually function after the event. The idea that these systems, that they can be disrupted, but they can kind of bounce back. And so that's something that we see a lot in natural systems, marshes or beaches or things like that in coastal systems. They can look really awful straight after the storm, but gradually they build back and everything comes back. And thinking about how those kinds of recoveries or resilience aspects can be translated into the more human aspect of coastal environments is something that's receiving a lot of attention at the minute. But sustainability, I would say, is the long-term piece with also with these punctuated events on top of it. So you can see that it's quite a complex issue to deal with in a short interview.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that was a very excellent, though, presentation. Our listeners will get a lot out of that. I think as you were talking, the whole issue of balance was coming up in my mind. The idea that we want to have a sustainable system, something that can continue in the long term to provide the critical functions that we need as people living near the coast or on the coast, as well as the natural systems need to continue to function. So I guess from your perspective, how do we find that right balance?
Well, I guess, as I said earlier, there's no one-size-fits-all, but I think you can kind of stratify your thinking a little bit about that. It doesn't all have to be case by case by case by case. Clearly, there are some coastal systems where our society has really dramatically changed the coastal environment for one reason or another. And so I think obviously New York, New Jersey, coastline, harbor area, the way the estuary has been modified there is dramatic changes over several hundred years in the character and the nature of the shoreline and those kinds of things, and all for very good reasons. If you thought about the kind of ecosystem sustainability and the concept there, then really the sustainability focus and the balance, if you like, between these natural elements and the human elements, if we can put it as simply as that, then in a system like that, then clearly the idea of thinking about sustainability in the 21st century is not going to lead you to tear down a lot of the human environment and really convert it back to what it was before. I think, though, one can focus in systems like that, in highly developed systems like that, on some ecosystem sustainability issues. And in fact, it almost makes it more important in a system that is very human-dominated to make sure that you do pay a little bit of attention to the ecosystem elements are still there. If you've got a very large urban population like we do in New York, for instance, then they need access to natural environments. They have obviously urban environments, but also coastal environments. The idea that there are places like Jamaica Bay, this area of wetland that is still hugely attractive to birds. That's a great kind of feature there, right in the backyard, if you like, of New York City, and it makes it more valuable, kind of ecologically and societally, because it's so scarce in that system. The idea of scarcity, I think, and value is something that most folks in this country can relate to. But the idea that in a system where the balance, because of things we've done, is really tipped very much towards the human side. The human side, obviously, we need to think about how we keep those functions like ports and container yards or fuel facilities, how we keep those going under sea level rise and storm effects. But let's not forget, just because the balance is so tipped that way when you look at the environment, that the ecology is also important and important, more important because there's not much of it. So the approach in a system like that might be very, very different from an environment which really has been very little disturbed, or that really represents quite a large area of nature. And of course, unfortunately, on the coast of the U.S., there aren't too many examples of that. With certainly the coterminous U.S. In Alaska, there are a lot. But I think that somewhere like down here on the Gulf Coast, the Pascagoula, it's a really small estuary. Most people listening to this have probably not even heard of the Pascagoula River. But it's one of the rivers in the United States that actually doesn't have any dams on, hardly at all. So you have this kind of natural functioning. It comes down into this fairly extensive, thousands of acres of natural delta there, which is really, it's got an interstate highway across it, but is otherwise relatively undisturbed. And so somewhere like that, you really can almost, where the balance is like the other way around, it's really largely natural and there are a few human things going on there, then I think you really can take a little bit more of a hands-off perspective and let the system find its own sustainable future, if you like. And then, so those might be end members. And then, of course, there are a number of coastal systems, probably those that most people are familiar with, that are somewhere in the middle, and that have a mix of, South Florida might be a good example, where you have some really important coastal assets related to ports, related to power stations, related to urban environments that are on the coast. And then you also have the vastly valuable ecosystems of the Everglades and of 10,000 islands and the mangrove areas like that. And so I think perhaps in South Florida, one can think of the different things that go on, and you can have one approach on one side, another approach on the other side, but you have to be careful about the juxtaposition between the two. The idea that where things are, where there is a lot of good nature left, and where there is a lot of important human functions going on, then I think when you deal with either of them from the sustainability side, you have to really be very conscious of the boundary issues, if you like, about how one influences the other, and vice versa. And so there's no one size fits all in this idea of how to do the balance, but I think you really have to think about the importance of the things that go on there at a larger scale. How important are they at the national scale on the economic side, but also how important are they on the national and global side ecologically as well. And so I think you can kind of, how rare they are, how important they are, I think you can kind of think about how to deal with this balancing act, not in terms of keeping everything the same everywhere and always dealing with the environment in the same way and always dealing with the economy in the same way, but I think you can zoom out a little bit and make some wise decisions in the larger picture.
Thank you. As I was listening to you, Denise, I was thinking about the principles of integrated water resources management, and it seems to me that what you were outlining fits very nicely with those concepts. The idea that a balance point, which is the goal, may vary according to a lot of different circumstances, and a lot of different values, and sort of finding out about those different circumstances and values means engaging with the various stakeholders and publics that are on the scene or have some stake in the system, and finding out about the needs and concerns and their perceptions of balance, and kind of working probably from a science-based perspective, but also a values-based perspective about finding the right balance. And that balance would vary, I'm hearing you say, according to the circumstances of the area and so forth.
Yeah, exactly, Mark. And I think the key thing about IWRM is the way that even if you're coming at something from the ecological perspective, or you're coming at something from the economic or the port development perspective, that you're thinking about in a more integrated way about the system and how it works, and about what any one action causes or results in other aspects of the system. That you see the system as integrated. You see the ecology, you see the port, you see the urban area, you see the schools, you see the bird watchers, and you see all of those. Even though your focus for your action, you may only be responsible for an action in one part of that painting that we just laid out, but at least you're seeing the rest, and you're cognizant of the rest, and you're trying not to I wouldn't say do no harm, because there are very, very few actions that we take in these complex water systems that don't actually change anything else. But if something else does change as a result of your actions, then you are cognizant of it, and you are aware of the consequences, and everybody else is too. And so I think it's really just a larger way of thinking about how these coastal systems work, or these water resources problems, the context within which they're set. It doesn't mean, for me, that you have to solve all of the problems at once. And I think that perhaps if we start to do that, particularly in coastal systems, I mean, that there are so many complexities here that we have to start somewhere, and in few places are there resources or understanding sufficient to solve all of the problems at once. But IWRM can lead you to starting somewhere with a part of the problem, and with a solution to part of the problem, cognizant of the rest of the picture, and aware of what any cascading consequences might be. And so I think that oftentimes when we think about IWRM, it kind of makes your brain explode. It's just too many things. And I think that it does mean thinking about lots of different aspects, but it doesn't necessarily mean addressing them all at the same level of detail. And that's a struggle. That's a struggle, because what that means is that you kind of have to, from a scientist's perspective or an analyst's perspective, you have to let go a little piece of it. You have to have enough ecology to understand what the consequences are, but you're not really in there trying to do something with that. So I think the more that we can have that integrated approach, but in the context of sustainability, look long-term into the future as well, then the more we will be able to make sensible decisions about our coastal systems.
Well, Denise, for those policymakers that we might have listening to this conversation, from your perspective, what should we as a nation be doing to move forward on achieving more sustainable coasts? Maybe you could give those policymakers your top 3 things to do.
Well, yeah, I guess the first one is think in an integrated manner, and appreciate the broader perspective for any individual policy or action that you're doing. But I think more generally, moving this issue off of first base really requires us to tackle something difficult. We can do a little bit of marsh creation there. We can do one of these living shoreline projects. We can elevate a house, when it's rebuilt after a storm by a few feet. Mm-hmm. And those are not bad things to do. But the big issues in coastal sustainability are the issues like New Orleans, like Oakland, like New York or other areas in the Sandy. There are big urban areas, big assets at the coast, and important ecological features at the coast. And I think that we have to grab something big to really make a difference. Otherwise, I think our coastal systems are not going to be as valuable to us in the future because, frankly, events are going to overtake us, especially how long it takes us to do difficult things. I mean, these are some really big, thorny issues in coastal systems. And unfortunately, it's difficult for us as a country to marshal the investments necessary to really make a difference in some of these. But I really think that from the policy perspective, maybe this is not an appropriate thing to say, but I'll say it anyway. Don't be afraid of breaking a few eggs here, because we have to really move these difficult things forward. It will not be easy. It will not be easy, and it takes real leadership on coastal issues to say this is the right path forward on this issue, and we will treat everybody fairly and bring them along, but there has to be a path forward. And just to get out of the gridlock that we can frequently get into in coastal systems, because it's very easy for most people to think about now and what it used to look like, and not to think about what it's going to be like in the future. And in coastal systems, because of sea level rise, it's really about what it's going to be like in the future that we have to focus on.
Right. Great. Yeah, the old saying, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break eggs, came to mind as you were talking there. This has been a real fascinating conversation here that we've had, Denise. I'm wondering, do you have any final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners before we get out?
Right. Well, I think that there is no one-size-fits-all. I think that's probably the main thing, and that these are difficult decisions, but they're also very urgent, because things are changing at the coast. They're not staying the same. We don't have huge amounts of time just to sit and ponder. We have to grab some of the big things. So let's grab a couple of systems around this coast, and let's work out what we need to do, and then get some things done. Great.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Denise. I think our listeners have definitely benefited from your insights and really your challenge to us about how to address these critical sustainability issues on the coast. I hope we're up to the challenge of really tackling some of these big issues in the way that you've outlined. So,
I hope so too, Mark. Thanks very much.
All right. So those of you who are listening, thanks for being with us today on Windows on Water Management. Watch this space for more interviews with leaders in water resources management in the coming months. Until next time, this is Mark Dunning signing off.